with Dave Powell from Torbreck Vineyards, and Dave is going to take us through a bunch of his current and new releases, and turn the floor over to him.
Thanks, mate. Nice to be here. We'll start off, I always like, I sort of make two groupings of wine, if you like. I make Grenache-based wines and then Shiraz-based wines. So regardless of price point, I always like to look at the Grenache-based wines first. Okay. Simply because, Grenache to me is, very similar to Pinot Noir. It's more medium-bodied and so on, rather than Shiraz, which is like Cabernet. So I prefer to, have the more medium-bodied wines for the big one. Saying that too, I love Grenache-based wines. I mean, to me, I drink them much more regularly than a lot of other things. Like, once again, I drink a lot of Pinot. I don't make it because it's too hot in the Barossa, but I drink a lot of it because it's so strong with food. Okay. And Grenache is fun to make. I mean, it's one of those things that when I first started working in the wine business, Grenache was literally considered a dirty word. Even Shiraz was on the nose in Australia in the early 80s. But this one's a blend of, well, both these wines are actually a blend of 60% Grenache, 20% Shiraz, and 20% what we call Mataro. Of course, the French know it as Mourvedre. It's originally a Spanish variety. It's from Australia, of course, originally. This wine, as I said, both these wines from any one year are actually the same wine. And at the end of primary fermentation, I split every component down the middle. Half goes into barrel for 2 years, which becomes the steading, which is the first Grenache-based wine I make. And the other half go into a blending tank, which is then allowed to go through the malolactic fermentation naturally, stabilised, bottled as a juvenile. So it's never been an oak. The name's a bit of a misnomer because juveniles people assume it's from young vineyards. In fact, these vineyards are 55 to 165 years old. I actually first made this wine for a very famous wine bar on the Rue de Richelieu, and the first in Paris, called Juvenile, so that's where the name came from. Okay. The first two vintages all actually sold in the wine bar in Paris. So you can see, never been an oak. It's lots of dark cherries and spice. Really sort of jumps out at you, almost a sweetness on the palate. There's no sugar, but it has that fruit purity that comes through as a sweetness. You've got to remember though, these vineyards, average yield 21 hectolitres per hectare. If these were in Burgundy, these would be Grand Cru vineyards. Just happen to be like our old Grenache vineyards that we have a lot of in the Barossa.
See, now, I know this is its own cuvee, but there are a lot of, what I've been reading about is there's a lot of winemakers now in the Barossa, especially of the newer generation, I guess, so to speak, that are using other varieties aside from Shiraz to kind of express the
it's good. Well, most of those guys actually work for me too. The Toys and the Standishes and all these commutes and all these guys. They're good, good young guys. Yeah, I suppose. I mean, I don't myself on all that interested. I mean, but you'd see a lot of them these days. They're using Tempranillo and Graciano and some of the Italian stuff. And I think it's great. I mean, I think it's a good thing that people experiment. Maybe I'm getting too long in the tooth. I'm quite happy just to work with what I do. And maybe when my kids, my eldest son leaves high school this year and as I was telling you, he was going to head over to France and live and work with Shiraz for a year before going down to Montpellier to study. So when he gets home, he'll probably have some weird ass Greek varieties growing in the vineyard. Who knows? But I'm happy just to be. I'm essentially quite lazy. I'll just do what I know works and leave it. All that sort of shit at the moment. So.
Do you think? I think that. There's probably, obviously within the Barossa, there's a tremendous amount of single vineyard sites and stuff like that. Is there any way, we think of all these things in Burgundy and in Italy and various places. What is the state of education, or how are Australians making aware people of the fact that they have these great single vineyard sites?
The problem has been in the past. Well, this one, just tell you about this one quickly, and I'll come back to that.
Sorry.
No, so this is literally the same. You can see that the Juvenile was 09, this is 07, because these wines spent 2 years in wood, albeit older barrels. Okay. So it comes out softer, round, and more complex, more traditional style of wine. And they're 2 years apart, of course, because one comes straight out basically bottled 6 months out of vintage, and the other one's comes out a couple of years later. The problem's been in Australia until fairly recently. The industry was dominated by big companies, and the most well known of them, of course, now the Foster's Wine Arm, or Treasure, what do they call it? Of course, Penfolds is one of the best. And if you think about Penfolds and Grange, good wine, but that comes from 5 regions. It doesn't just come from one region, it's 5 different regions. So there's never been any focus on, well, until recently there's been very little focus on regional characters. That's now quite strong. Okay. But now sub-regional characters is the next step. So, I can talk about all the sub-regions of the Barossa, Maranenga, Seppeltsfield, Greenock, Mopper, all the different Gumasaw, all the different, the different sort of sub-regional characters. But we're only just starting to see people expressing those things. And a lot of it's great because there are a lot of young kids guys and girls, particularly with families vineyards, that instead of selling the fruit now to the big guys, they're taking it and making wine like Troy Koleski, and there's almost on every street corner out in the back blocks of the Western Barossa now somebody's doing that. So we're starting to look at that. The trouble is the big companies in Australia are such assholes, and I'm serious about this. They've gone out and trademarked a lot of these sub-regional names, which legally I don't think they should have ever been able to do. So you've got Barossa Valley Estates have trademarked Cabernet, the Penfolds have now just trademarked Marananga, even though the Penfolds Marananga Shiraz I don't think has any Marananga Shiraz in it. But they've trademarked the name because they realise that this is going to happen and they want to stop it happening. They really don't want to get, because that then takes their brand start to suffer because they can't go down the sub-regional path.
Right.
Only the smaller guys can do that. So they're basically, I have no doubt they're doing that intentionally to block, which is kind of sad really, because the Barossa Valley has 21 major soil types, let alone all the subsoils and all the rest of it. The western side of the Barossa, the western side of the Powell River is completely different to the eastern side. In fact, I don't take fruit off the eastern side because I think those deep alluvial sandy vineyards, in my opinion, are too prolific in growing grapes to make great wine. They make good wine, commercial wine, but not great wine.
Okay.
But there's a very strong vested interest with the big companies for us not to get into that. It's going to happen anyway, but the trouble is there's going to be some fights over the fact that, I live in Marananga, smack bang in the middle of Marananga, and I can't put Marananga on my wine, not as a name, but as a sub-regional name, because the big companies registered it. Quite disingenuously in my book. But and I'm not even telling what I really think of those assholes. So. No, you're fine.
No, definitely, you've sugarcoated it.
Yeah, I know.
Quite well.
Trust me, anybody who knows me knows that I've just sugarcoated that. That's me being nice.